The wagon wheels creaked against the frozen ground as May clutched the worn leather satchel, containing her few possessions. At 19, she had learned that love was conditional, that worth was measured in promises her body couldn't keep. The village matchmaker had examined her like livestock at market, pronouncing her barren after 2 failed betrothals. Her parents, drowning in debt and shame, had accepted the merchant's offer of 50 silver coins for their defective daughter. Now she sat beside Trader Chen, watching the mountain forests grow thicker with each passing mile. He spoke of the lumber camps where desperate men paid good money for wives, any wives, even broken ones. May's hands trembled not from cold, but from the terrifying uncertainty of what awaited her. In these remote wilderness settlements, the camp materialized through the pine trees like something from a fever dream. Rough-hewn cabins, scattered among the stumps, smoke rising from countless chimneys, and the constant ring of axes against wood. Men emerged from doorways and paused in their work to stare as the wagon rolled past. Their eyes held a hunger that made May's skin crawl. "Here she is, boys," Chen called out, his voice carrying across the camp, fresh from the valley, looking for a good home. A crowd gathered, men with calloused hands and desperate faces pressing forward to examine the merchandise. They spoke about her as if she weren't there, debating her age, her health, her potential usefulness. The bidding started at 20 coins and climbed quickly. Standing at the edge of the crowd, Thomas Brennan watched the spectacle with growing disgust. At 35, he had seen enough of the world's cruelties to recognize another one unfolding. His weathered face, marked by years of hard labor and harder losses, remained impassive as the other men shouted their offers. But his gray eyes never left the girl's face, reading the quiet desperation there. Thomas had come to these mountains 3 years ago, fleeing his own ghosts. His wife Sarah had died in childbirth, leaving him with 4 children and a grief so profound it threatened to swallow him whole. The lumber camp offered isolation and honest work, a place where a man could lose himself in the rhythm of saw and axe, until the pain dulled to a manageable ache. The bidding reached 40 coins when Thomas stepped forward. The crowd parted, knowing his reputation as a man who kept to himself and spoke little. When he did speak, people listened. 60 coins, he said quietly. The crowd fell silent. Chen's eyes gleamed with unexpected profit. The other men grumbled but knew they couldn't match Thomas's offer. He was one of the camp's most skilled workers, known for his careful management of money and resources. Sold to Thomas Brennan, Chen announced with theatrical flair. As Thomas counted out the coins, May studied her new owner. Unlike the others, he hadn't examined her like a piece of property. His movements were deliberate, economical, and when he finally looked at her, she saw something unexpected in his eyes, not desire or calculation, but a weary kindness that caught her off guard. "Come," he said simply, shouldering her satchel. "I'll show you to the cabin." They walked in silence through the camp, past curious stares and whispered comments. Thomas's cabin sat slightly apart from the others, larger than most, with smoke curling from its stone chimney. As they approached, the door burst open and 4 children spilled out to boys and to girls, ranging in age from perhaps 6 to 12. Papa, the youngest, a girl with wild brown curls, threw herself at Thomas's legs. "Did you bring us something from town?" "I brought someone," Thomas said gently, his hand settling on the child's head. "This is May. She's going to be staying with us." The children studied her with the frank curiosity of the young. The oldest, a boy with Thomas's gray eyes, stepped forward protectively. "Are you our new mama?" the little girl asked bluntly. Thomas's jaw tightened. "That's enough questions for now, Lucy. Help me get May settled, then we'll have supper." The cabin's interior was spartanly furnished, but scrupulously clean. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with simple wooden furniture arranged around it. The children's belongings were neatly organized, their clothes mended with careful stitches. Despite its simplicity, the space felt like a home in ways May's childhood house never had. "You can have the back room," Thomas said, leading her past. "A curtained alcove. The children share the loft. I sleep by the fire." The room was small but private, with a single window overlooking the forest and a narrow bed covered with what appeared to be a handmade quilt. May set down her satchel and turned to find Thomas watching her from the doorway. "I won't lie to you," he said quietly. "I bought you because the children need a woman's care, and I need help managing the household. But I won't force anything on you that you don't freely give. You'll earn your place here through work, not other obligations." May blinked back. Sudden tears. In her village, marriages were arrangements of duty and expectation. No man had ever spoken to her of choice. "Thank you," she whispered. Over the following weeks, May discovered that Thomas Brennan was a man of his word. He rose before dawn, worked until dusk, and returned home exhausted, but always patient with his children. He never entered her room without invitation, never demanded more than the domestic help he'd promised to require. The children, initially suspicious, began to warm to her presence. Lucy, the youngest, was starved for feminine attention and followed May everywhere. The middle children, twins named Daniel and Sarah, tested her boundaries with the calculated mischief of 8-year-olds. James, the eldest at 12, remained aloof, clearly still grieving his mother and resenting any replacement. May threw herself into the work, finding unexpected satisfaction in bringing order to the chaotic household. She mended clothes with stitches finer than any the children had seen, cooked meals that actually had flavor, and gradually transformed the cabin into something that felt less like a shelter and more like a sanctuary. One evening, as she tucked Lucy into bed, the little girl looked up at her with serious eyes. "Mama Sarah used to sing to me," she said softly. "Do you know any songs?" May's throat tightened. She hummed a lullaby her own mother had sung, long before shame and disappointment had poisoned their relationship. Lucy's eyes drifted closed, a small smile on her lips. From the bottom of the ladder leading to the loft, James watched with conflicted emotions playing across his young face. Winter deepened, and the lumber camp settled into the rhythm of survival. Thomas worked shorter days as temperatures dropped, spending more time around the cabin, helping with repairs and teaching the children their letters by firelight. May found herself looking forward to these quiet evenings, watching Thomas's patient instruction and seeing glimpses of the man he must have been before grief hollowed him out. The crisis came in February when Lucy fell ill with a fever that wouldn't break. For 3 days, May barely left the child's side, applying cool cloths and spooning broth between cracked lips. Thomas paced the cabin like a caged animal, terrified of losing another person he'd grown to love. On the 3rd night, as Lucy's fever finally broke, Thomas found May collapsed in the chair beside the bed, exhausted from her vigil. "You saved her," he said quietly. "She's my daughter too," May replied without thinking, then froze at her own words. Thomas was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Sarah, my wife, she would have liked you. You have her kind of strength." That night marked a turning point. James began including May in conversations, asking her opinion on everything from trap construction to the best way to preserve meat. The twins started bringing her small gifts, interesting rocks, wildflowers, carved wooden trinkets. Even Lucy, who had already claimed May as her own, seemed to relax more fully into the relationship. But it was Thomas's gradual transformation that moved May most deeply. The lines of grief around his eyes began to soften. He smiled more often, laughed at his children's antics, and sometimes caught May's eye across the room with expressions that made her heart race. Spring arrived with a rush of melting snow and returning life. As the lumber crews prepared for another season of intensive work, May realized she had found something she'd never expected, not just a home, but a family that valued her for who she was, rather than what her body could or couldn't do. One evening, as they sat by the fire after the children had gone to bed, Thomas spoke into the comfortable silence. "I've been thinking," he said carefully. "When I bought you, it was a business arrangement. But these past months," he trailed off, struggling with words. May waited, her heart pounding. "You've given my children something I couldn't," he continued. "You've given them back their childhood. And you've given me," he paused, looking into the fire, "you've given me hope that life can be about more than just surviving." "Thomas," May said softly, "in my village, they said I was worthless because I couldn't bear children. But here, with your family, I've learned that love isn't about creating life. It's about nurturing the life that already exists." He turned To her then, and in his eyes, she saw not pity or resignation, but genuine affection and respect. "Would you consider," he asked quietly, "making this arrangement permanent? Not because of any obligation, but because I've come to care for you, truly care for you." May's answer came in the form of her hand reaching for his, their fingers intertwining like two damaged souls finding their way to wholeness. Outside, the moo